I got to back up, my words on this and my thoughts on this. The winning matters, man. It does when it's that close and there's a separation of 6 games right now between Luka and Jokic. I think, like I said, Luka's had the best year of any player in this league, offensively particularly. There's just been nobody that does what Luka does in terms of generating offense, controlling a game. But the 6-win gap matters when you're talking about Nikola Jokic.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the All-NBA Show, part of the All-City Podcast Network. We're talking MVPs today. Who would we pick for MVP this year? I'm Adam Mares, and I'm joined by Tim Legler. Legs, I feel like this year has a little less mystery than years prior, but that doesn't mean it's not contentious. It's still a contentious year.
It's contentious for sure. I think the conversation has really changed. The narrative has changed. There's different pockets to the season when the conversation was headed in one direction, and it took a major turn, obviously, when Joel Embiid went down. That really is what opened the door then for conversations about other guys, because it was obvious how long he was going to be out at that point. The day he went down, and whenever they gave that diagnosis, you knew he was done for a long enough period of time. He was out of the conversation. And at that point, I think he was a clear front runner. Was probably going to win 2 in a row. Now it's been opened up, and as a result, the conversation's become a lot more interesting.
It has, and let's get into the odds. We're, of course, using DraftKings Sportsbook to look at our odds, and the overwhelming favorite. I'm actually surprised at I'm not surprised at the order. I'm surprised at how overwhelming Nikola Jokic is the favorite. He's at minus 4,000 on DraftKings Sportsbook, which is all but a lock, Legs. I mean, Vegas doesn't usually get things wrong, or especially not that wrong. To be that heavy of a favorite, I feel like he has this one locked up. What's his case, and do you feel like that's an appropriate reflection of how the race should play out?
Yeah, you know what's interesting about this, man? So if this guy wins his 3rd MVP, and you look at it relative to his other seasons, and you'd be the perfect person to ask, how does this season stack up to his other seasons? Because look, he's great every night. He's great every year. He's clearly going to be in the MVP conversation every year of his prime. There's no question about it. He's that good. But you do wonder, once a guy wins a couple, and then somebody else gets one, and it goes in a different direction, man, it's very hard to get that conversation back to that guy. It just is, for whatever reason. Just go look at it historically. It's hard to do it. And yet, as soon as Embiid went down, I think Jokic got elevated to the forefront, and he's sort of held on to it all year. Look, when you talk about control on a basketball court, he's the epitome of what that looks like. He's got his fingerprints over every single possession for the Denver Nuggets, and it's hard to envision them and without him on both ends of the floor, really, because I think even defensively, the way he communicates, the way he cleans up the defensive glass, but mainly it's offensively, right? Just the way he directs everything, and nothing happens until he touches it, until he's involved. How impossible it is to match up for him. There's no personnel or scheme that affects him. You name it, man. He's just the epitome of consistent greatness in this league, night in, night out. So I'm curious. One, how do you rank this year compared to his other MVP seasons? You're the perfect person to ask. You might have a different perspective on that, seeing it every night, and what the team has gone through this year. And then 2, do you agree with me that it becomes harder for a guy to win it once he wins a couple in a row, and then they go in a different direction, the voters?
Well, for Jokic, the second part, they only went away 1 year, and he was the number 2 vote getter last year. It was Embiid or Jokic, and we know how that went. So I almost feel like he never left the conversation. It's almost like what you're talking about is if you leave the conversation, it's hard to get back into it. But if you come up close second 1 year and then you're back right in the conversation the next year, maybe that's easier. But to your first part of your question is really interesting, because his first 2, this is definitely his 3rd best MVP season. Of his MVP seasons, this would be the 3rd most impressive. But if you think about the previous 2, no Jamal Murray, no Michael Porter. So I think it was out of necessity that his numbers were a little bit higher, that maybe his dominance was a little bit more on display. But what's interesting is this year, they have the most wins of any year of Jokic's career. And so I think the impact has actually not changed, but the dominance has maybe changed out of necessity. It's not as needed from him on a night-to-night basis. And he is, of all the superstars in the league, the one most capable and willing of scaling his game down in any game, because what's working is working and I'm not going to disrupt it. So I think it's been no less impressive in terms of impact, but it has been less impressive in what's needed. And that's how I would kind of describe it. Luka Doncic is number 2 ahead of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Luka Doncic is plus 2,000, which again, second best odds, but plus 2,000 is so out of there. This was your pick about a month and a half ago. You thought he had a real chance at it. What's the case for Luka?
And if they had 10 more games tacked on to the end of the season, I think he wins the award. I think he's going to run out of time because look, here's what goes into it for me, for my criteria, and hopefully everybody uses similar criteria because otherwise I don't know what you're looking at. Statistics clearly matter. The production has to be there every night, so you got to be doing that. Then team success critical, obviously. Maybe team success in some cases maybe even more important than that. Individuals production, team success, control of the game, and how you play when the pressure is greatest. Those are things that really, really matter. And so when I look at all of these candidates, all of the players throughout the league, I think Luka Doncic has had the best individual season of any player in the league. But I do think when you talk about a gap of 6 wins, which is what he's at right now in trailing Jokic, he's 5 wins behind Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like, I don't know what it ends up. They have a handful of games left to play. So maybe that number narrows or maybe it gets a little bit wider. If you're talking 6-7 wins and it's such a tight conversation, that's going to be very difficult to overcome for people and voters. But I personally think Luka's had the best year. They're 16-2 in their last 18 games. If like I said, if they had another 10 games tacked on and they can narrow that gap even more and they just continue to finish the season on this heater, then I think Luka Doncic probably would win it. And this might set the stage for him to win his first MVP next year if they're near the top of the West. Being in 5 through 7, which is where they've been basically all year, that's probably not going to get it done, man, when there's other good candidates. And that's where I feel Luka's going to fall.
Well, what about, let's play devil's advocate here. When people say, well, Jokic was a 6 seed 2 years ago when he won his award, Luka looks like he'll be a 5 seed. What is different about those two?
Yeah, and I think also what was Westbrook the year he won it? Weren't they a 6 seed?
I think so. Yeah, they might have been one of the years. Yeah, it might have been him. It might have been a 6 seed.
I want to say they won like 45 games or something, like 45.
He had the triple-double average.
He averaged a triple-double, right? And it was post-Durant, and it looked like he had been abandoned by everybody, and he just averaged a triple-double and led that team to the playoffs. And they surpassed that roster didn't have any business being that good. So he wins it from the 6th spot. It's not easy. It's been done. He can do it. The difference, I think, in this case, and why it's going to be so difficult for Luka is because of who he's going against in this conversation. That's why. This is a guy that's at the pinnacle of the game, generally regarded as the best player in the NBA. That's how people view Nikola Jokic. And he hasn't gone away, and they could end up with the best record in the Western Conference, statistically looking the same, basically, as he's been in the past. That's why it's going to be harder for Luka, because it's relative to the other guy that he's being compared to, who's going to be at the top of the West and statistically just as good as he's ever been.
I think that's very fair. If I was playing devil's advocate on this, Jamal Murray being the team's second best player and missing 82 games, it's just such a big deal. Then Michael Porter, the third best scorer, missing, I think, 72 games that year. It was an easier sell. I know the Mavs have had an enormous amount of injuries, but it's an easier sell to say, yeah, but number 2 and number 3 played 0 games as opposed to, yeah, they missed half the season. I think it's an easier sell. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a little bit of a surprise to be up in this conversation, but plus 3,000 on DraftKings. I still think there are people that are going to have him number 1 on the ballot. What's the case for Shai?
He's going to get a lot of first place votes. I think it's going to be a very close vote. I really do. I don't think that maybe I'm wrong, man, but I don't think the MVP odds that you've given are going to be reflective of how this vote goes. I think there's going to be more first place votes going towards Shai. I think Luka's going to get some. There's going to be some other guys that are going to get votes, but probably not first place votes. Like Jason Tatum will get some votes. I think Brunson will get some. Giannis will probably get some. And maybe that's about it. But I think it's going to be a little bit closer with the first place votes between Jokic and Shai. I think Shai's even more than Luka in terms of first place votes, because I think the story is just incredible. They've sort of came out of nowhere. You look at it, how are they doing it without his 31 a night? I mean, the guy scores on everyone. I think he's one of the toughest 2 or 3 individual covers in the entire league. Everything they do is built around his offensive greatness and his ability to be efficient. You get to his spots. It sets up everything else on that team for how they run things offensively. And again, they're right there, man. 1 game back of the 1 seed, the overall best record in the Western Conference.
Yeah. Is there anybody that you think deserves mention? I mean, those 3, and then there's a huge drop off after that. Is there somebody that you think should be closer to everybody else, at least in the odds?
You know what? Jason Tatum, it's like this is funny because he's been in the mix, right, for the last couple of years. Jason Tatum's name's been coming up because of the team success. And then what happens? Like, you go out and you add so much help that it now works against him. So now they have the best record since he's been there. They've got 62 wins with 4 games to play. They're not going to be playing to win a lot of these games, but so who knows what they end up with. Bottom line is best record since he's been there. He had to sacrifice a little bit statistically because of who they added, so his numbers aren't quite as good. But now because of all the help, it's going to be viewed, well, my goodness, look at all the help. He gets less credit now. So I think Jason Tatum is, and who knows, they keep this group together and they keep winning like this. Is Jason Tatum going to just miss that window when he could have won it? I also think if they had, say, won the finals when they beat Golden State, I think the way he would be perceived in this exact scenario, everything being exactly the same, would be different. And he'd have a better chance of winning MVP now if he had already won a title that year against Golden State. I believe that. So he's a weird one, man, in terms of how people are going to view him. I think Brunson is probably going to be on people's ballots in the top 5 because of just that team. And like, you just look at everything about the Knicks is Jalen Brunson. That's the first thing you think of. And they identify with the way that guy plays and carrying that team. A lot of injuries. And here they are, 14 games above 500. They still have a shot at the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. And Giannis is going to get votes just because he just loads up the stat sheet. They're second in the East right now. If they stay there, he's going to get votes. He's one of the best players in the NBA. But maybe he gets hurt by how disappointing people think overall their season has gone.
I think the last little bit too, like let's be honest, man, voters are just human beings and they're very flawed. And so I think the last little slide that Giannis has taken is probably going to linger in people's minds when they go and cast their ballot. So fair or not, I think that's what someone will remember. As far as MVP goes, the first 2 weeks of the season make a strong impression, and the last month of the season makes a strong impression. If you dominated January and December, I apologize. That's the worst moment for voters. That's the worst time you could do it because everybody forgets at that point. All right. So those are the snubs. Those are the nominees. Who would be your pick? If you had a vote, who would get your ballot? I'm big on this. I got to back up, my words on this and my thoughts on this. The winning matters, man. It does when it's that close and there's a separation of 6 games right now between Luka and Jokic. I think, like I said, Luka's had the best year of any player in this league, offensively particularly. There's just been nobody that does what Luka does in terms of generating offense, controlling a game. But the 6-win gap matters when you're talking about Nikola Jokic. So I would give it to Jokic and reward the extra winning and reward potentially, look, this team might have the number 1 record in the West and have home court advantage throughout the Western Conference playoffs because of the way they run their offense through him. Yeah. I would land on Jokic as well. I'll say this, though, because I've told Mavs fans this before. I've been in those shoes where you want your guy to get it. He comes up a little bit short. Luka's going to win an MVP. He's probably going to win multiple MVPs.
He's going to win multiple. I'd be shocked if he doesn't win multiple MVPs. The question is, will he win? Will he be a champion? Will he or win multiple championships? Like that's where you start to get into that historical, legendary status and with the all-time greats. You've got to do both. He's going to get MVPs. There's no question in my mind. He's too young. He's too good. It's going to happen. Look, winning a championship is hard, man. There's no guarantee on that. And that's got to come with it if you really want to fulfill what you think historically, you want to go down as one of the all-time greats. You're going to have to do that. Jokic already has one of those. Might get a second one this year.
And you know what? Jokic won the year that he did not win MVP, and it was really satisfying, I think, for Nuggets fans to get that one. And if you look at the history of the NBA, Jordan and Charles Barkley, Akeem and David Robinson, there's been a lot of high-profile guys that did not win the award who felt like they should, and they went out and made a statement in the playoffs that became something that became part of the legacy and part of the legend. So for Luka, I am not betting against that being the case this year. That Dallas Mavericks team right now is a wagon, and he is playing phenomenally. So he might have an extra motivation going into this playoffs. All right, that does it for MVP, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning into these end-of-year awards. We appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We go live 4 times a week, breaking down the games. As we hit the playoffs, we're going to be breaking down all of the playoff games in detail, all the stuff you might have missed. You're not going to want to miss it. Hit that like button. We'll see you on the other side.